Hey there, welcome to the development report of my End of the Grid project, a combat system for a 2D action platform. The main idea of this video is to show the development process of the project and tell you what I learned, organized into the distinct stages of the development. So, what do I mean by a 2D action platformer? The term I want to use to describe the inspiration for this project is Metroidvania. This term can often be used as a catch-all phrase to describe a bundle of genres mashed together, and comes from the combination of the words Metroid and Castlevania, games that popularized a specific type of video game, 2D open worlds with action and platforming elements. They also include character progression, meaning the player will acquire new skills throughout the playthrough, making them more powerful and unlocking new sections of the map. What inspired this project was to mix the Metroidvania genre with platform fighters, since both have platforming as the main point. Even then, I had to put some kind of limitation. The scope of this project was going to include the design of the combat system and its development, and I was not going to develop the art for it. The project was also divided into 3 distinct stages, set as milestones: pre-production, production, and post-production, each one with its specific substep, which were defined at the beginning of the project. Before starting with the actual design, it is essential to define some inspirations to use. Sometimes ideas are difficult to come by, so having some groundwork and limitations can help with the creative process. In my case, considering the genres of the combat system, the games that served as inspiration were Hollow Knight, Nine Souls, Guilty Gear Strive, and Super Smash Bros. Ultimate. The features selected for analysis were attack, defense, resources, enemies, mechanics, and input. As an addition, movement was also taken into consideration, since it can also affect how players interact with the combat system. This analysis also served to learn about the context of combat systems related to the one I wanted to build and how these different pieces relate to each other. Some examples of the results of the analysis are frame data regarding attacks, different ways to let the player defend or evade from aggression, the resources used in combat and how the player interacts with them, the enemies you can encounter, some specific and individual ways to interact with the combat system in mechanics, and how the players actually interact with the game in input. Finally, for this stage, I also researched how to structure the code. The book used as reference is Game Programming Patterns by Robert Nystrom. The first thing to do in production is the design of the combat system, which includes the outline of how the code will be structured. As an inspiration, the player controls a character with electric powers. These are tied to the main mechanic of the combat system. The player accumulates a resource named Charge on enemies, which, when maxed, stuns them and opens them for combos. The player also accumulates Potential, which is used to execute heavy attacks that CC the enemy when stunned. Some attacks also take inspiration from Nine Souls and Hollow Knight, like a cancelable 3-hit sequence from the first or a pogo attack from the second. The offensive capabilities of the main character include 14 different attacks, including ones performed while airborne. These attacks are heavily inspired by Super Smash Bros. System, trying to avoid an overly complicated input such as the one seen in Guilty Gear, in which players have to input multiple directions to perform an attack. This way, I also reduce the amount of possible attacks players can perform. Code-wise, attacks are defined using Unity's scriptable object system, letting me create assets with all the attack information. Apart from this, attacks include a system to set specific functions to on-hit events, executing when hitting the enemy with a specific attack. The main problem I encountered when coding the combat system was Unity's input system, included in any project from Unity 6 onward. In a nutshell, this input system doesn't consider combined input, meaning that inputting right light attack, for example, results in both the input of normal light attack and right light attack. There were multiple possible solutions for this, like filtering input in the code. I ended up making a custom input system from scratch to avoid future problems, and let me customize the input system however I want. This custom input manager uses a separate scriptable object class called input reference, which is configured with a certain input. This input reference is put in each attack and compared to the current input to know what attack to perform depending on the current input. As I said before, this is a summary of the production stage of the project, so if you want to know more about the combat system, please feel free to go to the document and read the design section. Before letting others test the combat system, I decided to polish the demo a bit. This polish came in the form of a main menu with information about the actual demo as well as the different control schemes to let the tester know what they are playing and what to expect, as well as the mechanics they would be using. Finally, something I felt would add a lot of feel to the combat: Camera Shake. It would be executed when hitting every enemy, and its strength will also depend on the amount of charge dealt to the enemy. The higher the charge dealt, the stronger the camera shake. The testing was done physically. I wanted to have direct contact with testers while they were trying to break the demo, but overall, the main issue was the airfield of the combat. When trying to hit the enemy while airborne, the player falls immediately, when normally in games the player stays in the air while hitting them. Overall, however, the controls felt correct and didn't bring any problems to testers. Some of them felt the need to rebalance the charge inflicted by attacks. I also attribute that to the enemy design. Since the enemy is stationary and attacks in a set interval, the testers don't have real motivation to change the strategies or test any other avenues of attack. The last part of post-production is this, the video you are watching right now. I am currently writing it, and being the first video script I do, I hope it does what it set out to do, inform about the project. Making combat for a 2D action platformer has been in my mind as a project for quite some time, and I felt this end-of-degree project was a good opportunity to get the motivation to do it, and learn in the process. There are lots of things I would like to change in the demo. I feel I rushed through the second part of production and the code ended up a bit scuffed because of that. I also feel I could have spent more time bettering the experience in the combat, making it feel better to play. But overall, I'm comfortable with the result, not overly, but comfortable nonetheless. Thanks for staying until the end, and I hope you took something from this video. Bye!